All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Emunah Chevra, the Faith Friends, class number 14. We are already at February 12th, 2020, and I do want to dedicate this class, this group, whatever you want to call it, to the healing of all the sick people of the world, including Adel Rivka Bas Chaya Sarah, Anita Yael Bas Rus Tova, Ezra Mordechai ben Chaya Rezel, and all the other sick people of the world. So last week we talked, during these last few months, we have been talking a lot about what Emunah is and what Bitachon is. And so tonight I want to switch it up a little bit, and I want to talk to you guys and maybe ask you, what isn't Emunah? And why I'm asking that question for a specific reason, and we'll go into it as to the selections that I've chosen to read tonight. But I want to know what isn't Emunah, and what I mean by that is not the obvious, atheism and a belief that God is not intimately involved in the minutia of our life. What I really want to know, and what I'm really asking is, there are many people that I come across on a daily basis, and from all walks of life, from all religious levels, if you will, of many different religions. And a lot of them claim to be ma'aminim. They claim to be faithful ones, which has the word emunah in it, ma'aminim. And they claim to be a boteach. They claim to be someone of trust in God. But once they start talking about their reality and their situations in their lives, I hear a very deep underlying, I hear what they're not saying, which is that they have almost Emunah. That they have 99% Emunah. But 99% Emunah is inherently 100% not Emunah. So that's what I want to talk about, and what I want to focus on tonight is this disconnect that we have from the reality of the situation versus what we believe to be the situation. For example, if you call somebody materialistic, a friend, obviously, you tell them, you kind of strike me as a little materialistic, and they say, no, I'm not.
And isn't it perception?
Right. And you say, no, you're not. Right. But, but you just finished telling me about this and about this and about this. So you basically just proved to me that you are. Oh, but no, I'm not, because this person really is, and this person, and we have all sorts of amazing.
But isn't the question of calling somebody out, saying that they're materialistic, isn't that like Lashon Hara?
No, I'm talking about in a one-on-one friendship situation where it's kind of your job to point out, nice, in a very nice way. And it's obviously somebody who trusts you and who wants you around and who looks to you for saying things that might be hard to say to them. I'm not talking about calling out some random person and it's obviously not going to go well. But what I'm really talking about, and listen to what I'm saying, is that we really are very good, human beings in general are very good at self-deception.
Yes.
We're very, very good at it, to the point where we don't even realize it's happening. So when the person says, no, I'm not, they mean it, because they're looking at it from the inside. They're not looking at it from the outside.
And it could also be
right?
the people who surround them. That could be the lifestyle of,
right.
Unfortunately.
So that's the norm. Right. And so that's what they'll tell you, is that they're, I'm not because X, Y, and Z, and you should see the people in France. They're really materialistic. Compared to them, I'm not materialistic at all.
Really?
Right. So because you're holding yourself up to this insane scale doesn't make you less materialistic. It just means maybe you don't have as much money as they do. So your materialism takes a different form but deep down you are still very much, like your whole self-worth or whatever you define materialism as, that you're still defining yourself based on what you have, or at least on how you look to the outside world. And there's many, many different cases of this. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about the self-deception. The famous story of self-deception that I always think about is Korach. There's a famous person, Korach, who thought that once the Jews move into Israel, and Moshe Rabbeinu stops being their leader, Korach thought that he was the next natural choice to be the leader, and he actually ended up making a whole rebellion against Moses. And it was very, very bad. And the question is, the weird thing is that Korach was a Talmud Chacham. He was a very learned individual. He studied under Moses for many, many years, and it was a very very learned individual. So the obvious question is, why didn't the Torah that he learned protect him from this grave error in creating a whole rebellion against Moses, which ended up eventually in not only his demise, but his entire camp and his entire family being swallowed up by the earth. Women and children and animals and material, everything got just swallowed up. So why didn't all that learnedness, why didn't that protect him from himself and from his own machinations of thinking that he was the obvious next choice? And so I want you to think about that, and we'll talk about the answer or one of the possible answers by the end of the night. But I want you to think about that high level of self-deception and how important it is to focus on intellectual integrity and intellectual honesty when we're talking about Emunah. Okay, are you a lip servant who says you have faith, but when it comes down to it, you are constantly having anxiety about everything and anything that comes up under the sun, and I'm not talking about people who are on medication, but I am talking about the fact that even when you're on medication for anxiety, you still have to have the Emunah bit finishing up, that you can't just take the pill for anxiety and be done with it. You still have to work on Emunah. You still have to fill in the blanks that the pill is not going to fill in.
You have to continually return over and over
right.
and over.
Master return. Exactly. Very good. Very, very good. Master.
And it's hard work.
Baal Teshuvah. That's what we are. We're master returners. And so I want to start here from the Garden of Emunah, page 136. I know you all have your copy, but I'm going to read here from page 136. The section that I wanted to start in was right here. Mental and emotional health. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov writes in Likutei Moharan, his magnum opus, that the soul and Emunah are one aspect. Consequently, one's emotional health is directly related to the level of one's Emunah. Did you hear that? Let's say that again. One's emotional health is directly related to the level of one's Emunah. That's a big deal. We therefore conclude that emotional disturbances result from a breakdown of Emunah. Emotional confusion results from confused Emunah. Emotional weakness is the outcome of weak Emunah. This is a rule of thumb for all mental illness. Allow me to clarify. I'm not referring to such mental handicaps from birth, such as autism or Down syndrome. These are the result of divine considerations and soul reincarnations, neither of which we are capable of understanding. Yet, when we see that a person is born healthy, but at a later age succumbs to fear, anxiety, depression, and even schizophrenia, or any other mental or emotional difficulties, the root of the problem is a blemished emunah. But here's the good news. If an emotionally disturbed individual learns all about emunah and prays constantly for emunah, he or she will recover from the ailment. The more a person corrects and strengthens emunah, the more he or she will enjoy mental and emotional health. Every person, even the so-called normal person, suffers from emotional problems to a certain degree. In addition to fear, anxiety, and depression, people are plagued with boredom, lack of satisfaction, anger, worries, nervousness, and extreme mood fluctuations, just to name a few. Emunah cures all these ails. What are you afraid of? People are frozen with fear. They fear other people, their bosses, the IRS, terrorists, other motorists. The list is long. Anytime they get a muscle spasm, I should put ex-spouses in there too. The list is very long. Anytime they get a muscle spasm, they envision some imminent crippling or terminal disease. All these fears are expressions of a lack of emunah, particularly the lack of emunah that everything Hashem does is for our very best. When you're lacking in that one key element of emunah, it's opening the door to a lot of the opposite of emunah. Yes, question.
I worked with our behavioral health unit fairly closely, and their spirituality does play a role in helping people recover.
Good.
You have to be very careful about how you present that. For instance, saying, you're sick because you like emunah, you would never say that.
Right.
Because that is actually demoralizing and cruel.
Right, no, exactly. That is not what do you think that's what the author's saying? Is that where you're saying that?
I hope that's not what the author's saying.
No. Okay, so no, absolutely not.
I just want to be very...
Yes,
put
no.
my 2 cents out there.
He clarified very, very well right here that even the normal person suffers from emotional problems. He said that emunah cures all these ailments. It doesn't say that your lack of emunah is what caused it, because we all know that it's life events that caused it. It's Hashem that caused it. It's whatever it is. But you're responsible, and what the one thing you can control is how severe it is as far as debilitating you in your life. Because you should take a medication. Rabbi Nachman said, take medication if you need to. But he also said, don't use the medication as a crutch, and don't think that that's the panacea. That medication is a helper, not a cure-all.
It's a booster.
It is a booster for you to now be able to at least read about emunah for 5 minutes a day. And eventually your emunah muscle will become strong and grown and not atrophied.
Muscle memory.
There we go, muscle memory.
And that will help you move forward.
A person with emunah doesn't fear anything, for he knows that he is in Hashem's care, and that everything Hashem does is for the very best. This saves tons of emotional wear and tear, since Hashem does everything for the best. Then there's nothing to worry about. Not almost everything. Everything. There's a big difference, remember? A person then devotes an hour a day to self-evaluation, teshuvah, returning, and personal prayer. A person who does that especially has nothing to worry about. If a person is making their best effort at self-improvement, then why should Hashem punish him? Such a person doesn't need wake-up calls because he's daily arousing himself to teshuvah and to self-improvement. The result of an hour a day in personal prayer is increased happiness and decreased stress and worry. Be happy. It's my theme song by Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. You've heard it?
Yeah.
Don't worry, be happy now.
Caribbean did.
Sorry?
Did Rabbi Nachman also say that even when you don't feel like smiling, turn the corners of your mouth up?
He didn't say that, but he did say do anything you can to be happy,
Okay.
even if you have to be a little silly.
Silliness is good.
Right. So some people in their levels of religion are very stoic and very like anti-silly, and that's part of why Rabbi Nachman came into a lot of tension when his teachings first came out, because he said, no, you know what? Yes, leitzanus is an avera. Being goofy and being a clown is an avera. But he said the avera of depression is way worse. So do whatever you can to be happy, even if you have to be a little silly. Mm-hmm. Even if you have to dance a little jig and people are going to look at you like you're a silly person. But it doesn't matter, because you're doing what you have to do to ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, to serve Hashem with happiness. So be happy. Stringencies in religious observance are madness. Therefore, no one should be too exacting with himself. Don't worry about whether your performance of a mitzvah is perfect or not. Don't be OCD about it. Just do what you can with innocence and simplicity of thought and intent. Simplicity of thought and intent. Sometimes I just say those words over and over when I get a little anxious about not doing this mitzvah. I didn't do this mitzvah perfectly. Simplicity of intent.
Psalm 131? Anyway. I have to look it up. I have it somewhere.
What's the quote you're thinking? Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha? Serve Hashem with happiness?
No.
Or with tamimis is the word. Simplicity.
Yeah,
Serve Hashem with tamimis.
Basically.
Remember that the Torah wasn't given to angels, but to human beings with human limitations. Those who demand angelic deportment from themselves are therefore candidates for frustration, gloom, and disappointment that results from the arrogant feeling that they should be doing everything perfectly. And Dr. Abraham Lowe says, perfection is a hope, dream, and illusion. And you can drive yourself nuts in the pursuit of perfection. A person connected to the truth is happy serving Hashem the best way he or she can, without giving into hair-splitting stringencies. Very powerful.
Interesting, the founding fathers and mothers used the expression pursuit of happiness.
Right. They didn't say the achievement of happiness. They said the pursuit of happiness.
Because it's the journey. Yeah, for a long time I thought it was the pursuit of happiness.
All right, moving right along in your books, let's fast forward to 143 and another part that I found very relevant. Did you want me to read this now, or did you just want to point out one part about it? What is it, the simplicity of it? Let's read it. Psalm 131. Hashem, I've given up my pride and turned away from my arrogance. I am not concerned with great. Was that?
Oh gosh.
With great matter?
with great matters or with subjects too difficult for me.
Or with subjects too difficult for me. Okay. Instead, I am content and at peace. As a child is quietly in its mother's arms, so my heart is quiet with me. Israel, trust in Hashem now and forever. Beautiful.
It is beautiful.
That is very good. David and Melech really set it up beautifully, and that's why it's our job to make our own psalms, to have a journal. That's what Psalms is. It's a journal of David and his journey up and down through all the different struggles, and he went through it all. He experienced every situation and emotion. That's why there's a psalm out there for everyone. You can find your psalm if you read through Psalms carefully. So to fast forward in the Garden of Emunah now to page 143, we're going to talk about worry and trust are mutually exclusive. A young man complained to his rabbi about financial difficulties. The rabbi told him to pray to Hashem and request Emunah. Please, Hashem, give me Emunah as a free gift. The young man protested, claiming that there's nothing faulty with his Emunah. Remember how I started the share by saying this is how people react. There's nothing wrong with my Emunah. I've got Emunah. He exclaimed, but I'm worried about my old debts and my new bills and feeding and educating the children, on and on and on. The rabbi smiled. Let your ears listen to the utterance of your mouth. You claim to have Emunah, and in the same breath, you say you're worried. That is mutually exclusive. The two don't go together. A person that truly believes in Hashem doesn't worry. He or she knows that Hashem will always feed and clothe them and their family. And here's proof. The rabbi showed the young man a picture of his grandson, a smiling, plump toddler with rosy cheeks, playing to his delight in a sandbox. Have you ever seen a worried 3-year-old? No, a toddler doesn't have to worry. Mommy and Daddy are responsible for bringing home the bread. He continues playing in the sandbox, his task at this stage of life, and doesn't worry. He hasn't missed a meal up to now and trusts that he won't miss a meal in the future. By the same token, you should trust your Father in heaven while concentrating on your own task in life without worrying either. Hashem won't let you miss a meal. The young man took a deep breath, letting the rabbi's words penetrate. Your task in life, continued the rabbi, is to serve Hashem. Let Hashem take care of your financial situation and income worries. And fill in the blank here with whatever worries that you're going through too, if it's a lawsuit or if it's a this or a broken item or a whatever it is. Hashem, speak to Hashem in this manner. Master of the world, there's no one else I can turn to but you. Ein od milvado. For the universe and all its contents are yours, and you sustain all your creations as you see fit. My livelihood is in your hands alone, and not up to me. Please, beloved Father in heaven, send me my livelihood as you deem befitting, and teach me how to strengthen my faith, to serve you in happiness, and to have absolute trust in you and in whatever you do, in whatever way you do things. Help me cling to you always. The young man adopted the rabbi's advice. The more he prayed, the more he strengthened his Emunah. And the more he strengthened his Emunah, the more his financial difficulties disappeared. Once we believe with complete faith that Hashem is the only address for solving all problems, our heart fills with joy and trust, knowing deep down that Hashem doesn't cast a loving son or daughter away. Just as Hashem always sent a means of sustenance in the past, or a salvation somehow in the past, he shall continue to do so in the future. He has a very good track record. Give him the credit that he is due. And now just to continue on to page 183. Can I ask what you're doing here with this? Are you recording? No? Oh, okay. You taking notes?
I'm not doing anything.
Oh.
Oh, no, we're not recording. No, don't worry.
Oh, no, that's fine. You can if you want to. I just wanted to know.
Recording just in case your own recording
Does it
not
come
take-
through?
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I work in IT. Redundancy is key. That rhymed.
Redundancy is key might be a good rule for life.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, repetition and redundancy, right? We got to learn Emunah every day, not just once a week. But this is a good start. Now we're going to fast forward again in your textbooks in the Garden of Emunah that everyone here has to page 183. We're going to read in general. In general, life throws many tests of Emunah in our path. In fact, every single difficulty in our lives is a test of Emunah. One needn't feel blame or feelings of inadequacy. Therefore, there's no need to persecute yourself, except that your difficulties are all from Hashem to facilitate and to stimulate your spiritual growth, and all for the best. Every time a person successfully passes a test of Emunah, he or she moves up another rung in the spiritual ladder, assuring a better life in this world and in the next world. Beautiful. That's where I want to wrap it up with the Garden of Emunah tonight. Again, the Garden of Emunah by Rabbi Shalom Arush. I highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon and
Changed my life.
Breslov's website. Yes, it's changed my life too. It really, really did. This was really the beginning of everything and why I even wanted to give this group. I'm not allowed to call it a class. So, I know that with Emunah, my life is so much more tolerable. It's certainly not perfect. It certainly doesn't mean I have any lack of challenges. If anything, now I have even more because Hashem knows that now I have the Emunah and I can handle more. Hashem only gives us exactly what we can handle. So when a person says, I can't handle this, this is too much, that's a statement of arrogance. Because you're saying that you know better than God and that God gave you something that you can't handle. And that is pure arrogance to think that. It's trust me, it's not purposeful arrogance. It's not, I understand the innocence behind it, but you have to understand what it is, what it really is.
It's fear.
It's fear and it's anxiety, and it's the opposite of Emunah. It's saying that God did something that you couldn't. He gave you something that you couldn't handle.
So how do you pull yourself out of that?
That you don't think you can handle.
Right. So when you remind yourself of your Emunah, and you say, Tzaddik Hashem b'chol derchav, righteous is Hashem in all his ways, God, then that helps me remember. And that's why we say it 3 times a day. That's Psalm 145. Righteous is Hashem in all his ways. That helps you remember that this too is for the best, right? Gam zu l'tova, that God is not cruel. He is not uncalculated. He knew exactly what he was doing when he gave me this hardship because he knew that I could handle it. So please, God, as a free gift, help me handle this situation that you have put in front of me. Thank you for giving it to me. Thank you for having so much faith in me. We have to thank Hashem for the faith that he has in us, because I know that you have so much faith in me that you gave me this challenge knowing it would help me and knowing that I could handle it. That is a much better way to go about life. A much better way. Instead of being the victim of the people in our lives and being afraid, oh, I can't go up against this person. This person has all this money and all these lawyers and everything. I'm so afraid. It's not even worth it. We're going to lose. Let's not even go to court. Let's just, no, we can't handle it. We can't go, it's very anti-Emunah to be defeatist, to have a defeatist nature.
Before you begin.
Before, right? You're waving the white flag before the battle even begins because you know, oh no, because I've seen other people in the same situation and I've seen other people and they went to court and they lost and therefore I'm going to lose and blah, blah, blah. You know, like these kind of thoughts are very anti-Emunah, and these come from people who claim to be ma'aminim. So let your ears hear the words, right? That's what we said. Let your ears actually hear the words that are coming out of your mouth. There is a disconnect, right? There's a very far distance from here to here for some reason. And so we're saying, yeah, I believe in faith, I believe in God, but no, this is just an insurmountable, this is just stupid. Let's just not even go down this road. It's not even worth the fight.
Sometimes you just have to lance the boil in order for it to heal.
Right, right. That's a good way to put it. Take the leap, right? Well, it's not a leap. Take the first step, right? The first step, what is it? The first step in a journey of 1,000 miles or something. No, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid of the first step. But inertia is our greatest enemy. So I want to move on quickly now to, well, not quickly, but at a nice pace, to Battle Plans, another incredible book that I find is still very relevant in our constant, why? Because we're constantly under attack by the doubts and the thoughts that Emunah is not real and that Hashem is not really in my life and that I don't have a chance because of blah, 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 blah. So that's why I'm reading this book. Because that suffix, that Amalek that's constantly attacking us, we constantly have to battle Amalek every day. It's in the daily remembrances that we read after morning prayers. That remember Amalek. Okay, so be aware that you are constantly under attack by the Yetzer Hara, and you are constantly being filled with doubts of whether or not this situation really is for my ultimate benefit. And whether I can really, and that God only gives me what I can handle. So I want to jump over to page 195, which is the beginning of chapter 12. And in my studies, in preparing for this year, God sent me to this page, and I found it highly relevant. So with Hashem's help, let us continue. And again, it's all connected. It's amazing. When I'm making these shares, I literally I beg Hashem for clairvoyance and just Hashem, help me connect it, help me have the thesis, help me restate the thesis, help me do whatever it is I need to do. And sure enough, he points me to all the right places. It's incredible. It's nothing but a miracle. The Yetzer Hara of the intellect. This is very important, so listen closely. The Yetzer Hara of the intellect leaps into the dueling field, brandishing the sharp sword of intellectual arguments and shouting the battle cry, but, that's his battle cry, but, Rabbi Nachman tackles the sharp-witted Yetzer Hara in section 64 of Likutei Moharan, where he begins, Hashem Yisbarach created the world from his compassion because he wanted to reveal his compassion. Without creating a world, to whom would he show his compassion? We're learning a little Kabbalah now. But it's okay. This is the kind of Kabbalah that we should learn. Without creating a world, to who would he show his compassion? But when he wanted to create a world, there was no place, no makom, so to speak, to create it because everything was him. He was all existence. So in order to create a world, he had to contract his light to the sides. And this is called tzimtzum. Very good. Tzimtzum, a contraction. And through this tzimtzum, a vacated space, an empty space, called Chalal Panoi, was created. Now, this contraction is really only in the eyes of the beholder. Really, nothing changed. Hashem, however, created the illusion of his not being there. This empty space is where all time and space exist. The world in which we live out our lives is entirely confined to the Halal Panoi, the vacated space. In this Halal Panoi, you really can't observe Hashem's presence. Although, as discussed in the previous chapter, sometimes you can gather enough bits of starlight and enhance it with enough emunah to conceptually observe that Hashem is behind this world. No matter how hard you look, you cannot experientially observe the presence of Hashem. And remember we said ha'olam, the word for world, and really all of existence, is connected to the word ha'elem, concealment. So all of creation is really just a concealment. It's just a curtain that God's hiding behind, so to speak, so that we could have free will. To illustrate this sublime principle, think of the Indian Ocean tsunami that killed 230,000 people. Those who chose to could see Hashem's will and awesome power in this event. No one, however, could observe Hashem's essential compassion in the tsunami. Rabbi Nachman says that we're not going to really understand the nature of the Halal Panoi, this empty space, until the ultimate future, La'asad Lavai, when Mashiach comes. Because there are two opposite things happening at the same time. Yesh and ayin. Yesh means Hashem is there, and ayin means Hashem is not there. Hashem made it as though there's no godliness there, so to speak. If that weren't true, it wouldn't be called empty, and there'd be no place for the world. The truth is that there is godliness there, because nothing could exist without Hashem's vitality. This paradox will persist until Mashiach comes. To bring this cosmic concept down to the level of our experience, every person is considered a small world. And in our own world, we each have a Halal Panoi. This is the conceptual space where Hashem simultaneously is and isn't. This explains how a frum person, an observant person, a genuinely frum observant person who believes in Hashem and in Torah u'Sinai, Torah from Sinai, can still cheat in business or have anxiety. Mm-hmm. At the moment that he decides to do what the Torah forbids, the Yetzer Hara, the evil one, convinces him that Hashem doesn't see and doesn't know what you're doing. We're not talking here about a person who is overcome by desire. Sins of desire come from a different place. The person who calculates that he can cheat in business and get away with it is, to that degree, an apikores, someone who denies the existence of God, or a heretic in English. Most of us have our moments of apikorsis, of heresy, when we believe that we are unobserved, when we speak deliberate lashon hara, evil speech, when we are in too much of a rush to sift the flour before using it for the purposes of kosher, and when we tell deliberate lies, not just when we feel backed into a corner and get defensive, but when we intentionally lie in order to harm someone. Whenever we think we can get away with something, we have banished God from our world. Rabbi Nachman's first point in this section is that the empty space really does appear empty. It's very convincing.
To us.
Right. Hashem, in his wisdom, made it that there are situations in our lives and in human history where he indeed appears to be absent. So even though it's an illusion, it's not an illusion that we can dissolve in our pre-messianic world. Of course, there are great souls who are able to live their lives in such a way that they focus on the reality beyond the illusion, but even they do not live in a world without the illusion of otherness. Rebbe Nachman asserts that there are two kinds of heresies. The first kind of apicorsis stems from being too externalized. You look at the world and all you see is the outside, not the inside. What we call the chitzonius and not the panemius. The externalities. You look at things that happen to people, such as children dying, terror attacks, sterling individuals suddenly killed in car accidents, and you may ask, where is God? This Yetzer Hara may attack a person who merely reads or hears about such a tragedy. It strikes even more vociferously when one actually knows the people involved. The hardest test is when the person himself is struck, such as when a person loses a parent or a limb. All such tragedies can become a duel between the Yetzer Hara of the intellect and a person's emunah. The Yetzer Hara can use very sophisticated weapons, shooting with a steady stream of questions, such as, if God is compassionate, how can he let people suffer like this? What did an infant do to deserve to die? How do you know that the Torah is true? Rabbi Nachman states that to this first kind of apicorsis, there are indeed answers. The Mishnah instructs, quote, know how to answer the apicorsis. This implies, and there's a whole shir based on that subject alone, this implies that answers exist. The impediment to finding such answers is the human tendency to dwell on the externals, on the chitzonius. We are trained from our earliest years to notice only the external. Thus, children's books picture a visit to the farm. The cow gives milk. The hen gives eggs. This is fine for a 5-year-old. But as we mature, our education remains just as superficial. So now we're in 6th grade, and we learn that there are 4 kinds of clouds. We can learn the differences in their formations, but it's still just external. Clouds give rain just as hens give eggs. Even if we get to college physics, it is still a description of the external workings of nature. The Big Bang made matter just as cows make milk. All this ignores the spiritual underpinnings of existence. Why do cows give milk? Who created cows? What does bovine lactation tell us about Hashem's will to nurture? Why do clouds make rain? What is the supernal will that dictates how much rain will fall? What is the spiritual causal relationship between human sins and drought? To look at the world in a deeper way, as we discussed in the last chapter, requires making the effort to discern Hashem's will and wisdom in the people, objects, and events of life. Rebbe Nachman is telling us that if we look for Hashem's wisdom, often, but not always, we will find it. This is because, he explains, of the Shaviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. The breaking of the vessels was a primordial event in which the physical world, as Hashem originally created it, could not absorb the vast and intense nature of its spiritual message. So it broke, in the same way that a balloon will burst if you try to fill it with more air than it can contain. The ramification of the breaking of the vessels is that the personality of the world and its inner meaning is accessible throughout existence, but it's not easily observed through physical reality, which is, after all, only fragments of the broken vessel. The breaking of the vessels was not an accident, but rather part of Hashem's plan to create a world that offers us the opportunity to become godly people through the process of tikkun, or fixing. You may have heard the term tikkun olam. So this kind of apicorsis, heresy, where one looks at the world and is puzzled by it, stems from looking at the outside, the external. Let's consider suffering, for example. One sees a good and virtuous person suffering from a debilitating disease. And the intellectual Yetzer Hara screams, "It's unfair. There's no justice in the world." Obviously, there is no just God. If one probes much deeper, however, one can discern many higher purposes served by suffering. Suffering can mobilize a person to make fruitful changes. Suffering can catalyze a person's potentials. Suffering can move a person beyond being engrossed in the physical. Investigation will provide scores of examples of people who reached heroic levels of kindness, generosity, or courage as a result of their suffering. Dr. Rahamim Melamed Cohen was a successful educator, devoted husband, and committed father of 6 children, when at the age of 57, he was diagnosed with ALS, otherwise called Lou Gehrig's disease. The prognosis was grim. Gradually spreading paralysis and 3 to 5 years to live. Dr. Melamed Cohen, an observant Jew, was haunted by his intellectual Yetzer Hara, which asked, "Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? All my life I tried to do good, to fulfill the commandments, and to act properly towards my fellow man. Maybe here and there I wasn't okay, but where is the proportion between this terrible illness and my small sins?" Very common questions. As the illness progressed, however, Dr. Melamed Cohen found himself tapping reservoirs of inner strength and courage that he didn't know he had. Now, 14 years later, totally paralyzed and on life support, he has published 9 books, written by his eye movements on a special computer. I think Christopher Reeves used the same to write his book, and discovered new careers in art and writing poetry. He administers the yeshiva founded by his late father and keeps up a voluminous email correspondence with hundreds of people worldwide who look to him for encouragement and wisdom. He silenced his intellectual Yetzer Hara long ago by recognizing that the challenge posed by his illness catapulted him to higher levels of creativity, compassion, and courage than he could ever have attained without it. These are the best and most important years of my life, he answers. He asserts. Rebbe Nachman instructs us that this first kind of apicorsis can and should be answered. When the intellectual Yetzer Hara fires off, you don't really believe that, do you? Don't be afraid to respond, yes, I do. I see the inside as well as the outside. You see the outside. I believe the outside has an inside. Wisdom should take you to seeing the intricacy, beauty, and purposefulness of everything in a way that attaches you to its source. The scientific approach, on the other hand, is limited to description. The desire to describe things without including meaning is what Rebbe Nachman labels the waste product of the search for truth. According to Chassidus, interpreting events by looking inside can also involve taking into account the possibility of previous Gilgulim, or incarnations. The Baal Shem Tov would console parents who had lost a child by revealing that soul's previous, almost perfect Gilgul, or incarnation. Upon fixing the one or two things that were left for it to repair, the child expired because there was no longer a need for him to be in this world. Of course, this method is not accessible to us today, but just saying, who knows what this soul had to fix from previous Gilgulim, should counter the arguments of the intellectual Yetzer Hara. It's worth remembering that even if we are privy to most of the facts of someone's life, including our own, we have read merely pages 657 to 689 of a 1,000-page story.
Wow.
Thus, when Rebbetzin Chaya Sarah Kramer, who wrote the book Holy Woman, faced the most agonizing test of her life, she used this method of factoring in previous incarnations and past lives. Her unofficially adopted daughter Miriam was snatched away by her birth mother, who had many other children. Rebbetzin Chaya Sarah, left childless, remonstrated with herself. Perhaps in my last Gilgul, I had children and she didn't have children, and I did to her what she's doing to me now. Yet another tool for appraising a situation from the inside is the concept of kapara, or expiation. Kapara means that, for profound reasons not amenable to human understanding, suffering is the mystical soap that cleanses us of all the stains with which we sully ourselves through our wrong actions, words, and thoughts. Thus, every bit of suffering in this world has the spiritual effect of purgation. Kapara operates in both visible and invisible ways. The visible effect is that suffering changes a person so deeply that the root of whatever distance the person from Hashem is extirpated. For example, if a person who is arrogant and who commits the sins that flow from arrogance is stricken with suffering, he or she usually becomes way more humble. The implication of kapara is that no suffering is wasted. All suffering is a currency that pays for something. Note that none of these inside rebuttals to the Yetzer Hara of the intellect takes us to a place of clear understanding. We are ever and always in the Chalal Panoi, the vacated space. Rather, they lead us to admit that when Hashem issues a decree, he weighs myriads and myriads of factors, and we can get a fleeting glimpse of only an infinitesimal fraction of them. Imagine being certain about the appearance of a dog from seeing 16 hairs at the end of his tail.
I like that.
Which is a perfect lead into battle plan number 38. Answer with the inside. When King David sought to conquer the Jebusite city of Jerusalem, he encountered massive walls topped by formidable battlements, protected by skilled warriors. How did David win? His men entered the city through the water tunnels deep beneath the walls and made a surprise attack from the inside. The first kind of Yetzer Hara of the intellect can be defeated by going deep and striking from the inside. Do not attempt this battle plan against the second kind of Yetzer Hara of the intellect described later in this chapter. Rabbi Nachman prescribes arguing with this Yetzer Hara. For instance, let's say you know a wealthy person who is both a devout Jew and generous philanthropist, who supports dozens of worthy causes and charitable institutions. Suddenly he loses all his money. Your intellectual Yetzer Hara challenges you. How could God let this happen? He used his money to help so many people. Why would God punish such a good person? It's so unjust. Answer this Yetzer Hara by penetrating to the inside. From the outside, it looks unfair. But who says that the goal of life is to have a lot of money? Maybe it's not a punishment at all. What is the real spiritual purpose of life in this world? To fix oneself. Maybe losing his money is a test that he has to go through in order to rectify himself. And if he passes that test, he'll be the winner, not the loser. What do I really know about this person's soul and its needs? I don't know much. Nothing. But I believe that Hashem is good and does good. So this financial loss must in some way be good. Perhaps it's a kapara, and it's better to suffer financial loss than any of the much worse kinds of suffering that could happen to him, God forbid. That's a different way to think of it entirely. Hopefully your emunah will expand to the point that this Yetzer Hara will never rear its head. Then you can reserve all your arguments for debates with people who are still prone to look only at the outside. Do not fear engaging with them. Beautiful. All right, we're at the hour mark now. So I think that should we stop here or should we read from Rabbi Miller? What do you think? What's the consensus? We're at the hour mark. I'm okay with going a little over for one question and answer, but it's really up to you. This is your house. What do you say?
I'm enjoying it. It's yes. My brain is full.
Your brain is full? Okay. So we'll save this one for next week. So thank you everyone so much for coming, and thank you for Ron and Deborah Heller for hosting us. And we should all be zoche, we should all merit to be able to talk to God all the time and to ask him for real emunah, living, breathing emunah, not just the intellectual emunah, but the actual kind that makes us not afraid and not anxious. Amen.